Okay, so if this is your first time using InDesign, then we're going to pretty much be starting from the beginning. If this is not your first time using InDesign, it's probably good for you to either forward pass to the point that you want to learn, or just go to another video that I'm making on more advanced techniques in InDesign. But for right now, we're just starting off from the very beginning, and we're going to go ahead and start learning about InDesign from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and open up InDesign. Right now I'm in InDesign CC, and I'm going to create a new project. But if I had some previous projects opened or done before, it's going to show up right here in this view. And as you can see, I only have one that was here, and that was September 17th, and it was done about 8:42 p.m. And so I'm going to go ahead and create one. If I needed to open one that's not showing here, I can just go to the open menu option right there. So I'm going to leave all these parameters here, but just keep in mind this preset details here. You can change the name here. You can also change the size, and you can use the pica units, or you can change those to like inches or something like that and see the full on inches. Attributes here with the width and the height, the number of pages. I can say what my start page is and change the columns and all that other stuff before I even start my application, start my design. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create and leave all that the same. And the way this looks right now is not really the way I want mine to look. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the preferences, because we want to be able to change this interface to what we like. Okay, so I'm going to go here to the edit. If you are inside of PC, is in the edit menu to get to the preferences. But if you're on a Mac, you'll have a little bar, or you'll have the name InDesign CC here up at the top, and you'll click that, and then you'll be able to go to the preferences. But for PC, we go to the edit, preferences, and I'm going to go to the interface here. And now I can go ahead and go to interface and change the color, the theme that I like. I want this to be a little bit darker. And then you'll see this match pasteboard to theme color here. I can turn that off and on here, but normally what you would do is, if you want to go ahead and change the pasteboard here, you can go to view and match pasteboard to theme color. So it all depends on what you intend on doing with that. If it looks better this way, if it helps you progress through your design, then you can go ahead and change that. So now we got our the basics down about setting things up, and there's a ton of other things up in there that we'll go over later, but for right now that's all we need to do in regards to the preferences. Now, one of the things we're assuming here inside of our InDesign project is that we are going to have facing pages, meaning it's going to be like a book, a magazine, or something like that. We're assuming that because when we initially made our document, I'm going here and I'm going to make a new document. Okay. So when we initially made our document, we pretty much kept all of the parameters here the same. We simply changed the name, and maybe we'll change the width or the height. But if you're not going to have facing pages, if it's not going to be something like a book or magazine, then you want to turn this one off right here where it says facing pages. But if you are creating a magazine or a book, you're going to want that facing pages to remain on. So that's one of the parameters that we kind of want to keep in mind depending on what we're doing. Another thing you also want to note is that there's a ton of InDesign templates out there. And one of them is from this InDesignSecrets.com. So they have a lot of free stuff here that you can search for, and it'll be good for you to go through and look at that in case you want to start off with a template as opposed to starting off with a blank slate. So that's some good information and a good resource to have. So at this point, the first thing I want to be able to do is save my document, even though there's nothing there. So I'm going to hit Control S to save that, and make sure that you save it someplace that you can remember. So right now I'm going to just save this in the download because it really doesn't matter for this, because we're just learning how to do this, and I'm not going to save this for later. So just make this out of my test project. And let's look at this interface here. So on the right hand side here, we have our layers and our switches and our strokes, all related to the things that we put inside of our on our canvas here. If I were to select my layers, you'd see right now there's nothing in my layer, and I have this layer name, and in my pages I have this one page here. I have a master pages up here, and that's all there is. And for each one of these tabs, tabs here, if there are any extra attributes that you can add to these, or let's say like an extra layer, or on here an extra page, normally you would do that with the little menu below. So right here, if you see the menu at the bottom, it says edit page size, and actually I can create a page or even delete a page. And over here in the layers, I can rename the layer, I can add a layer here, I can create a layer here. I can even create links and strokes and colors and stuff like that. And when you get to the colors and the strokes, they really don't have those menus there because everything you need is right there. But always keep an eye out for these little menus like this because they're easily missed. And it makes it a lot easier to go here as opposed to going all the way up here to the menu bar and selecting that. So that's the first thing. And because I'm going to be using the layers a lot, I'm just going to go ahead and grab this tab here, and I'm going to pull this out and keep my layers tab open. I can also grab my pages tab and pull that out and put it right next to my layers tab. And so you can see everything is pretty customizable, where you can just customize it and place it whatever way you like that makes it easier for you to work. So on my left hand side, you'll notice all these tools that you're able to use, and these are the tools of the trade. You know, these are the tools that you'll be using to be able to either add text, add pictures, shapes, that sort of thing. And then at the top we have the parameters of whatever we have selected. To give you an example of that, if I were to have, I'm just going to select this shape right here. I'm going to drag a rectangle up here. You'll notice now, while this rectangle is selected, you'll notice that my menu above here has changed. And that brings us to the point of understanding the difference between the two types of selection tools. We have this first selection tool, which is the selection tools, the basic selection tool. Then we have this direct selection tool. So I'm going to use the shortcut keys here. V is for the standard selection tool, and A is for the direct selection tool. And the direct selection tool is designed to be able to select points or elements of an object. So you see I select it, and then I highlight the area in which I want to drag. When you initially select an object, so let's say if I go back to my standard selection tool, when I select this object, I can move it around, I can resize it by dragging the edge. If I go to the edge, first I'm going to select it, and if I go to the edge and a little bit off the edge, you'll notice that it turns into this arch double arrow, and that allows me to spin it around. And the little guides actually show me the angle in which I'm spinning it. For instance, if I were to spin it like this, you see how it's showing me the angle in which I'm spinning it. So even without seeing a picture there, I can see that I'm spinning this right back to the beginning. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that when I go to the direct selection tool and I select an object, the thing is that it tries to select everything. So I'm now in the direct selection tool. Every point is currently selected. So if I move one, it looks like I'm in the selection tool, but I'm not. But when you see these points and they're darkened like that, it means all of them are selected. That's the standard that happens every time you go from the regular selection tool to the direct selection tool. So in order to make sure I'm not selecting all the points, I just select away from the object, and then I highlight the area that I want to select. Now if you look here, that point is darkened and these points are not. That will allow me to just move. Oh, that one's selected too. Okay, let me try that again. I'm going to select this one, and then there we go. And now you can see I'm only moving that point. And if I want to move the whole thing in the direct selection tool, basically what I would have to do is select all the points and then move the entire object. Or just go to my standard selection tool and move the object that way. Now for each object, like I said, all the parameters are up here. So let's look at some of these parameters. If first I select the object, if you look up here, you'll see it change. When I deselect it, there's nothing up there. And then when I select the object, you'll see it changes to match the parameters that exist for that object. And for this object, I'm just going to go ahead and add a color, a fill color. And then I'm going to change the stroke here. So I'm going to go ahead and make the stroke bigger. And then I'm going to first change, and then I'm going to change the stroke from here. So there we go. And every time you're dealing with this, you have to make sure that you have the object selected. Now, how can I make sure this object selected? Well, the best way to do that is go look inside of your layers panel. Inside of your layers panel, you'll see that there's a layer here. And then here's the polygon tool that I've just placed, the polygon object I just placed. And then you'll notice that polygon object has a blue dot indicator right next to it. That means that this is currently selected. So if I were to duplicate this, so if I have this one selected, you'll notice that this one is currently selected in my view. So now if I click here, this one's active, and now this one's active. The reason why you want to know this is because sometimes you'll have many objects in your frame or on your stage, and you can't really access it. So let's say if these two are on top of each other, and I want to access, let's say it was on top, and I'm trying to get to the bottom one. First, let me get this one. There we go. And I'm trying to get to the bottom one. This one might be in the way. So the best way to do that, if I didn't really want to have to move this first, so if I had this one in place and I didn't want to have to move the top one to get to the bottom one, basically I can just go here to my layer, select it, and then I can move it that way. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we want to really address one thing before we finish this video. We want to address the fact that right now, as I'm adding my objects to my layers, I have to make sure that I start naming these objects. So every time I add an object, I should go here, double click slowly, or double click, a slow double click, and then you can rename your object. So I can go ahead and rename this yellow title. You want to make sure that every time you add something in your layers panel, you name it, so that way you know what it is and you know what you're moving around and what you're deleting. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. I'll see you in the next video.